Honorable Deputy Speaker, honorable members, Bagaetsho Dumelang. I think it's important for me up front to declare that now that the ANC has passed through the whitewash of the report, we will tomorrow be tabling an action to have this report be declared irrational and set aside. And that is a promise I make to the people of this country, that this ANC government has no moral authority to speak of and is bankrupt at best. What is critical to acknowledge, Deputy Speaker, is that the rights and the freedoms contained in our Constitution are being denied to our fellow South Africans. True freedom really requires not just political and social freedom, but economic emancipation. Yet South Africa is facing an unprecedented economic crisis. Economic growth for 2014 fell to 1.4% and it's forecast to grow at only 2% for 2015. The most recent manufacturing data shows a decrease in production of 1.2% quarter on quarter for the second quarter of 2015, following a contraction of 0.5% in the first quarter. The rand is weakening and faces a crisis, and yet even though COSATU called for it for some years ago, clearly they failed to use it and it has shown no effect on stimulating an export-led growth. And South Africa still today is a net importer. Meanwhile, honorable members, for ordinary South Africans, the cost of living continues to rise. But this economic crisis is really about one thing and one thing alone. It's about jobs, or it's about the lack of jobs. Without freedom, without jobs, freedom is limited. The new inequality in South Africa today is between those who have work and those who don't have work. Deputy Chairperson, the real cost of the economic crisis is the freedom of the 8.4 million South Africans who today don't have work. Plainly stated, 1 in 3 South Africans is unable to find work. 1 in 3 South Africans has the lack or the means to an opportunity to provide for themselves or their families. But of even greater concern is that 2 out of every 3 of the unemployed are young South Africans, 70% of these being young black South Africans. Young black South Africans who are not enjoying the benefits of freedom. Deputy Chairperson, ke batla ho bua ne ke ile go Limpopo. Ka ba bona ka weekend. Batho ba rona ba mo South Africa ba sokola. Ga ba sokole fela ba sokodiswa ke puso ya ga President Jacob Zuma e paletsweng ke go tlisa ditšhono tsa mmereko mo go bone. Ba nkaela ka gore ga ba kgone go kry mmereko la ba na le degree, la ba na le diploma. Ba bona gore the only way o ka kry mosebetsi ke ga o le connected to lekoko la ga President Jacob Zuma go ya go pele. I want to highlight, honorable members, this economic crisis is not because of apartheid or Jan van Riebeck. It's because of President Angazi, Jacob Zuma, who has failed South Africans. That in fact, since President Jacob Zuma has come into office, unemployment, those not having an ability to have work, has risen by 30% since he took office. His promises and his plans do not put food on the table, no pay for an education, while the corruption of his government and his ANC cronies deprives the people of this country of basic services. What is worse is that last week the president called the press conference, unprecedented in the history of his presidency, to simply come and tell the people of the South Africa an update on the state of the nation. Wait till we waited, the South Africans, hoping for something to be announced. Instead, the president told the people of the South Africa, no, everything seems to be going well. I'm afraid, Mr. President, it's not. South Africans are facing a crisis of unemployment, and it's primarily your fault. Ultimately, what is true is that he came and took responsibility that, in fact, we have a crisis before us. He cannot deny this, for even the documents released by the ANC for the National General Council confirm that there's an economic crisis in South Africa. According to the latest World Economic Outlook by the IMF, over the next 2 years, emerging markets and developing economies are projected to grow at 4.45%, while sub-Saharan Africa is expected to grow by 4.7%. Other countries are making progress at a rate faster than us, but we ourselves as South Africans can't, thanks to this ANC government. The fact of the matter is that under the ANC's government, Minister Junior Jacob Zuma Gigaba introduced job-killing visa regulations, now attempts to repair the damage through another ineffectual interministerial committee. It's under this government's watch that the energy crisis has gone from bad to worse. In fact, Wemidupi and Kusile are now delayed by a further 2 years. You can see what's important for the ANC when I look around. It's Nkandla, because as long as we defend number one, we are doing our jobs. But when we're talking about the economy, other things seem to be much better. For ultimately, South Africans are suffering with lack of work. But you will account for this, because ultimately, it is under your government's watch that the energy crisis has gone from bad to worse. And ultimately, no economy can grow unless it is energy secure. It's under this government that we're seeing water shedding in communities on top of load shedding as infrastructure collapses under the mismanagement of this government. It's under this government's watch that investors have been moving away by threats of expropriation and uncertainty regarding empowerment policies. Minister Rob Davies tabled the BBBEE codes, which he was then forced to review, then to clarify, and now today it's blatantly clear that the BBBEE was designed by the ANC currently to empower those who are politically connected to the ANC. This is a crisis of this government's making, and when we in this house asked about the extent of job losses in this country, it became quite clear. President came here and said, I do not know. So, Honorable Speaker, I believe this government is denying the freedoms of South Africa. It's got a bloated cabinet with 9 ministries, but it seems quite clear that they cannot solve this economic crisis. So let me be frank. The only way we'll solve the economic crisis is by replacing the members on this side by members from the DA so we can take South Africa. The South African economy, in our view, has potential to reach between 5 to 8%. And this, ultimately, requires a few things that we need to do. We need to solve the energy crisis that is crippling South Africa by breaking the Eskom monopoly and opening the grid to independent power producers. We need to reject this benefit scheme that has been put forward by President Zuma for the ANC of a 1 trillion rands nuclear deal. Secondly, we must take action to rid the economy of the legislative and regulatory constraints in key industries, such as suspending these job-killing visa regulations and the MPRDA to give greater long-term certainty to investors. But above all of this, we must make sure that we create an environment that is sustainable for small businesses to be able to grow. We must recognize that the heroes in South Africa are those who create jobs, not the ones who are shedding them. And we must make it easier for micro-enterprise to proceed. We must, and I will pick the fight against the unions who have ultimately have this inflexible labor regulations that ultimately protect the rights of those who work at the expense of those who are unemployed. The damage being caused by SATU and COSATU is the untold story of this economic crisis. Honorable members, we will ultimately, when we take over this government, repeal the Labor Relations Act, such as those relating to collective bargaining, closed shop agreements, and minimum threshold for representation. These are key aspects of the law that are destroying people from being able to find work. Finally, it becomes crucial that we look at expanding the benefits enjoyed by companies in the special economic zones to the whole country so that South Africa becomes a hub for entrepreneurship to grow and for jobs to be created. Honorable members, the economy is like a living organism that will only grow and flourish under the right conditions. And we are showing that here in the Western Cape, that where we govern, unemployment is the lowest in the country. Government, therefore, has a responsibility to provide leadership. We must, if we are going to create jobs, ultimately ensure that we have a reliable infrastructure, a skilled labor force, a legislative and regulatory framework that supports and incentivizes job creation, and policy certainty that attracts investment. The solution lies in replacing this corrupt government to truly a champion of an inclusive economy. The DA government would make it its mission to unlock the potential of our economy and respond to the needs of the human face of our economic crisis. We will provide leadership for this economy for those who are desperately looking to, so that we can have an accountable, competent government that serves its people and fulfills their hope. South Africans next year actually have a profound opportunity of voting out both Junior Jacob Zuma and replacing them with a government that will serve the people. And they will
Thank you,
remove
Honorable
you. I
Maimane.
thank you very much.
Your time is expired.